All right, and welcome in, everybody. Hope you all are having a fantastic, fantabulous, awesome freaking day. My name is Garrett Shoemake, and this is the Shoemake Take. Welcome in one more time. This is the 2025 NFL season preview series, and today we are talking about the Cincinnati Bengals. Quite the interesting team we're talking about, because this is the closest team to mid that we've talked about in this entire series so far. And I don't mean mid in a bad way, more in the sense of this team's floor is not very low, but their ceiling isn't very high either. So they're kind of, in a way, stuck somewhere in the middle, which is the definition of mid. A lot of people like to use mid in a very negative context, and it completely loses the meaning of the phrase. So this team is going to be around that ballpark, and we'll explain why and break it all down here for the 2025 Bengals preview. But with all the banter aside, before we begin talking about this, if you guys are new to this series and want to know what this is about, I'll briefly explain what we're going to be breaking down. For those of you that want to go ahead and jump into the discussion, the timestamp's going to be in the playhead on the video and also in the video description. So for those of you that want to go right ahead, knock yourself out. All right, but here's how the 2025 season preview series works. We first start with recapping 2024, pretty much picking up where this team, in this case the Bengals, left off, pretty much just mentioning their record, what happened last season, and then we'll jump into their offseason, mentioning any notable coaching changes, additions in free agency, their losses, who they drafted, pretty much summarizing all of that. And then we jump to what I think this team is going to look like. Are they going to be good, bad, mid, in this case, for the Bengals, along with noting strengths and weaknesses with the team that will either make or break them, whatnot. And then after that, we'll talk about their schedule and analyze it, looking at if it's easy, is it difficult, identifying important matchups that I think are really going to be interesting for the Bengals in this case, along with concluding with where they're going to finish in the division, are they going to make the playoffs, and then we'll cap that off with my official record prediction. And then we wrap a bow on the whole thing, pretty much looking at some storylines that I'm going to be looking for, why I'm going to be watching the Cincinnati Bengals this season. So let's begin with their 2024 season, which was up and down, to say the least. They finished 9-8. They started off pretty bad, but then went on a 5-game winning streak to end the year and narrowly missed out on the playoffs. But what they did was very lucky, I should say, given the circumstances of this team. Joe Burrow, Jamar Chase, and T. Higgins had to hold this team together by a thread. Now, obviously, it's not so tongue-in-cheek. Obviously, Mike Gesicki played well. Chase Brown got better as the year went on, right? It wasn't just those three guys, but those three guys were the focal point of everything for the Bengals last year, except on the offensive side. So Trey Hendrickson was phenomenal, so we'll add him there as well. I probably should have just put him there anyways. That being said, though, this defense overall was terrible, and really the lack of being able to draft well on that side of the ball over these past couple years, it really showed this season. It showed how much it hurt them. Their corners were inconsistent. Linebackers were all right. They were not bad. And the defensive line, Myles Murphy was, again, disappointing. McKinley Jackson and Chris Jenkins weren't as exciting as advertised. So it has been a crapshoot for the Bengals defense in that department. And so here's the hoping that with Shamar Stewart and Demetrius Knight, who we'll talk about here in a little bit, that they actually can get things turned around. But what happened with the Bengals last year was simply not sustainable. And so it was challenging. It was up and down. It was a roller coaster. But what they did last year, I don't think it can be replicated. But jumping into their offseason, the big thing was they fired defensive coordinator Lou Anarumo and replaced him with Al Golden, the former defensive coordinator for Notre Dame, and bringing in a new philosophy, bringing in a new identity. Lou Anarumo, I will give some credit where credit is due. I thought he was horrible the whole year, but going back and doing some research and seeing what other Bengals fans thought of him, yeah, the Bengals defense did improve as the year went on. I mean, they did play a role in their 5-game winning streak at the end of the year, but he did get fired for a reason, because holistically the defense was not good, and the improvements were too little too late and not enough overall to really justify keeping him around. And so you bring in a new fresh face, also running with the trend of defensive coordinators jumping from college to the pros and making good transition. For example, Jesse Minter in LA with the Chargers, following Jim Harbaugh from Michigan, and then Jeff Hafley, the former Boston College head coach, going to Green Bay and having immediate success there as well. So the Bengals are hoping that they can find the same result in Al Golden coming from Notre Dame. In their free agency, they really didn't do a whole lot. Their most notable signing was bringing back Samaje Perine. He was in Kansas City last year. But again, this is not his first stint in Cincinnati. And I can really like this move. Not because Samaje Perine is great or anything, but it rounds out their running back room and brings it full circle, where Chase Brown is kind of your do-it-all, more flashy back. Zach Moss is your more powerful guy. And Samaje Perine is your more designated extra receiver, if you will. And so now they got all three guys that kind of specialize in different things. And that helps the overall depth in, like I said, the full circle of your running back room. And then they brought in Lucas Patrick to provide depth, to Daryl Slayton to play a role in the defensive line. I think he might be starting, and we'll have to see. And then they also brought in linebackers Oren Burks from Philly and Joe Gillis-Harris, I think he came from Jacksonville, to pretty much fill in some of the voids that were left with the linebackers that they got rid of this offseason. Losses, though, the list is a little bit bigger, as you can see. They lost running backs Khalil Herbert and Trevion Williams. Trevion Williams leaving, that sucks. He was there for a long time. So to see him leave, that's unfortunate. But they also lost Alex Kappa and Trent Brown. Alex Kappa simply was just not good at all in his time in Cincinnati. And then Trent Brown, not as good as he used to be. So unloading some pretty bad weight there, I guess, which is fine. Then they also lost Sheldon Rankins, who ended up going to the Cleveland Browns. So that's fine. No, he didn't go to the Browns. He went to the Texans, right? Yeah, he went to the Houston Texans. Excuse me. Malik Collins is who went to the Cleveland Browns. So they lost more defensive tackle depth there. Although he was a starter, he was good. And then they also lost this guy's a depth, Jay Tufili. And then they lost three linebackers. Akeem Davis-Gaither and Joe Bacci were free agents. And then they cut Jermaine Pratt, who immediately got swooped up by the Raiders less than a few days after that. So there's definitely a lot of change for the Cincinnati Bengals. I shouldn't say a lot, but a decent amount to where it's obvious that there's going to be some things different. They lost a couple starters, didn't really add too much back, so not great. But when you have Joe Burrow, T. Higgins, Jamar Chase all on massive contracts, well, that's just sometimes that's just going to happen. You're not going to have money to pay everybody. You're not going to be able to bring in a lot of guys when you're paying three guys so much money, and it's only going to get worse for the Bengals, which has been detailed numerous times now. But this is the result of that. And so you lose some players, and you really don't do a lot in free agency to help supplement your losses. But their draft, though, does show some promise. Obviously, number one, their first round pick, Shamar Stewart, really extremely talented, one of the highest ceilings out of all the edge rushers in a really stacked draft class. And so they're hoping that they can get him on the field and get him to play well. If the Bengals will actually give him a contract and not try to steal his money, Jesus Christ, it's absolutely stupid what they're doing with Shamar Stewart. I made a whole video on that not too long ago. And then in the second round, they added linebacker Demetrius Knight. This guy's a prospect I really like. I didn't do a whole lot of research on him, but I knew enough to say, okay, yeah, like this guy's a solid prospect at least. I can get behind adding Demetrius Knight. Obviously, cutting Jermaine Pratt and losing those two other linebackers that I mentioned, it became more of an immediate need. So get a guy with some good upside, take him. I fully respect the decision. And then they drafted guard Dylan Fairchild next. This prospect was someone that intrigued me. He's got some good tools and good size, so we'll have to see how that works out. The Bengals really need a good youth of offensive linemen to help rebuild this thing. Their offensive line's been terrible for years now, so trying to invest into it, fine by me, I guess. They added linebacker Barrett Carter, which, again, to add more depth and to add another young guy into that linebacker room, which has got a lot of newness to it. And then later on, they added tackle Jalen Rivers, another high upside guy on day 3. And then Taj Brooks, the running back out of Texas Tech, was the running back that they picked at the end. And I really like Taj Brooks. He showed a lot of good things in his final year at Texas Tech. And maybe not this year, but maybe even next year or the year after that, this guy could end up being the number 1 running back on this team. He might be like my favorite draft pick outside of Shamar Stewart. Where they got him fantastic value in my opinion as well. There's a lot to like with Taj Brooks. So it rounds out a draft class, again, that is very promising. Is there a lot of high upside players in here? Not as much as maybe some other draft classes, but for a team that needs an infusion of youth on the offense and the defensive side, I think they did the best job they could with this situation, and there's a lot to be intrigued about. So overall, I think the draft was pretty darn good. So that being said, though, is this team improved? No, they lost more than they gained in free agency, and the draft class, it's not, obviously we don't know how good it's going to be now. It's going to take a few years until we figure that out. So right now, the Bengals are not an improved football team by any means. So that being said, I already talked about it at the beginning of the video. I think this team is going to it's going to be mid, but I have them taking a slight step backward from what they were last year. I touched on it a second ago, but this team, what they did last year is not sustainable. You can't have a bad defense and then have an insane offense having to drop 35 points a game, 40 points a game just to win football games and keep this team afloat and not falling off a cliff. You cannot do that. That's not going to happen in the NFL. It does not work that way. And so I expect with this defense, with a lot of newness, obviously with a new defensive coordinator, there's going to be some change and turnaround at defensive line, losing Sheldon Rankins. And then the linebacker spot is almost completely new. Logan Wilson is still here, who's good. But other than that, like I said, they brought in 2 linebackers in free agency. They drafted 2 linebackers. There's a lot of newness in this spot, and there's gonna be some growing pains. Overall, in this defense, there's gonna be some growing pains every time you get with a new defensive coordinator. At least I shouldn't say all the time. Most of the time, there's probably gonna be some growing pains as everybody learns to adjust to the new scheme and figures out how they all fit together in this giant puzzle. So, with that being said, I have the Bengals taking a slight step backward. But there are going to be some reasons to be intrigued and excited about this team. Obviously, their strongest parts of their team is on the offensive side. Quarterback, Joe Burrow, top 4 quarterback in the NFL. Pass catchers, obviously, T. Higgins, Jamar Chase, and tight end Mike Gesicki. Those are like the big 3. And then Andre Yosevich had a very quiet, solid season for the Cincinnati Bengals. Didn't see a whole lot of him, but if you go back and watch Bengals games, he shows up more often than you think, and very quietly, again, he was a solid receiver for them, a solid number 3. And then their young receiver, Jermaine Burton, seems to be turning heads was turning heads in mandatory minicamp, and seems like he's finally developed a work ethic, finally getting all that figured out. And so now development is actually starting to happen with this guy. So people are impressed, people are turning their heads. That's a guy that you might be looking at, maybe not taking a big step forward, but definitely playing a more contributing role in this offense. And then running back, I decided to consider a strength because Chase Brown did get better as the year went on. Zach Moss was mostly disappointing. But at the same time, adding Samaje Perine is important to rounding out that trio of running backs. So now they have more utility, which I can respect and I can appreciate. And then Taj Brooks, I don't know if he's going to see the field all that much, barring injury. So we'll just have to see. But at least for now, he's a rookie that has excitement and will provide depth for now. Is it a strength in terms of, yeah, this position group is going to be good? No, but it is an improvement and will be solid at minimum for the Bengals. And then defensive line, I thought about this. I don't know if it's really a strength. That's why I put the question mark right next to it. As you can see, I don't know. The thing is, Trey Hendrickson and Shamar Stewart, that entire thing is in the air. And then you still have B.J. Hill at nose tackle. He's really, really good. I like him a lot. But you also got to rely on McKinley Jackson and Chris Jenkins to step up in year 2. And those guys were not as good as advertised last year. And to the point where McKinley Jackson was taking steps or taking more snaps over Chris Jenkins. And Chris Jenkins was drafted in the 2nd round. He was the higher draft pick. So that's not a good sign. So it's interesting. I don't know if they're going to be a strength. They could be. They got the upside to do it. I just don't buy into that. That's why I put it in question mark. And ultimately, I don't think the defensive line is going to be a strength for this team. But that's not to mean it's going to be a weakness, though, which obviously the biggest one for the Cincinnati Bengals is this offensive line. They got rid of Alex Kappa and Trent Brown. Those guys were not very good for them. Fine. But at the same time, I'm not expecting the new guys to step in their place to be that much better. it's the Cincinnati Bengals. Seeing the Bengals and having bad offensive line play is like peanut butter and jelly. It just goes together for now, as it has been for years at this point. So unless they make a significant jump where, okay, they're no longer bad, I'm expecting them to be bad. Linebacker is another weakness. I mentioned it earlier, but there's a lot of newness at this position. So it's going to naturally, in my opinion, take some time for everything to gel together. And again, with a new defensive coordinator, adds on to that newness. So I think the linebackers are going to have some struggles. I think Logan Wilson's going to be fine, as he always is. But Demetrius Knight, as a rookie, he's going to have some growing pains. Barrett Carter is going to have some growing pains. Oren Burke should be okay. He was kind of like the first string backup for Philly, so he's going to have a bigger opportunity here in Cincinnati. So here's the hoping that he does well. But I'm not really sure about that. And Joe Gillis-Harris is just depth. So it's going to be interesting what this linebacker group does and how they develop as the year goes along. And the last one, the safeties. Geno Stone was exciting until it wasn't, and Jordan Battle, him and Geno Stone both were just liabilities in coverage for most of the year. And barring them getting a significant improvement, I don't know that they're going to be that much better. So right now, I have them as a weakness on this roster. So that kind of wraps up how I feel about this team as my script falls over. I apologize. I got to buy a new case for this, actually. I don't know why I haven't bought a new case. I guess because it's still really good. Just this is kind of broken, but it's not too bad. If I shake around a little too much, then it's going to fall over. But as long as I kind of keep still and keep composed, then we're going to be okay. But moving into the schedule, this schedule is, quite frankly, exciting. It's intriguing. There's a lot to be interested in with this schedule. First of all, it's challenging because there's not a lot of, I would say, free wins on this schedule, where free win, I just pretty much mean like, oh yeah, I see that team on the schedule. The Bengals are definitely winning that game. They're definitely going to win at least 3 divisional games. They're definitely going to beat either the Jets or the Jaguars. They probably could beat both, realistically speaking. The Dolphins is a challenging one. The Cardinals is probably, I don't know, like I would say like I said, the three divisional games are at least I can lock those in for a win. Either the Dolphins, Cardinals, Jets, the Jaguars, the Patriots. They could probably win 3 to 5 all 5 of those. Realistically speaking, I'm guaranteeing they're going to win at least 2 or 3 of those. So that's 5, 6 wins, kind of guaranteed, but the rest of them are not. You look at the first 2 weeks, Cleveland and Jacksonville. These are the ones that are going to be very important for the Bengals because the Bengals always start off slow. They always look sluggish. Joe Burrow doesn't look like himself. And then every year it's always, oh, is this the year the Bengals fall off? Wow, whoop-de-doo. And then they get better as the year goes on. But this year, that can't happen. The Bengals have to at least start off competitive, and you are going against the Browns, and then you're going to Jacksonville. Or no, you're hosting Jacksonville, and then you go to Cleveland. Excuse me. These are games that are winnable for Cincinnati. That you can win these games. I know they struggle against Cleveland in Cleveland, but the Cleveland Browns are going to be garbage this year. They're not going to be good. That's a game you should win. And for the Jaguars, I expect this team to start off slow. And for the Bengals, I think they're a better team in week 2. I think they should win that game. And then you get into Minnesota. Obviously, Justin Jefferson versus Jamar Chase. That's going to be absolute cinema. That's going to be one of the most fun games to watch on the Bengals schedule, in my opinion. And then you follow that up immediately with prime time at Denver. This game last year when these 2 teams faced off was one of the best games of the entire year. It was so much fun to watch this game. So to see them now in Denver in prime time once again, I'm going to have my eyes glued to this game. And then Detroit, that's going to be a very tough matchup. But knowing Jamar Chase, T. Higgins, and Joe Burrow, they're going to absolutely do what they can to compete against the Detroit Lions. They're going to keep the Bengals in this game for at least for a little bit. And then you go to Green Bay. That's going to be a tough matchup. Joe Burrow versus Jordan Love is a matchup I'm excited for. And then you go to Thursday Night Football, hosting the Pittsburgh Steelers. Divisional rivalry. Obviously, that is tough. That's going to be a really interesting game to watch. Then they host the New York Jets. The Bengals are definitely winning that game to me. And then after that, you go to Pittsburgh. You're facing the Steelers two times in 3 weeks. I don't know if you win both games. It's possible, but it's also equally not possible. And then you play the New England Patriots. Going to be interesting because I think the Bengals should win this game, but their head coach, Mike Vrabel, has done a good job, at least when he was with the Titans, of being competitive against the Bengals. So I expect this game to at least be close for part of the game. And then you face Baltimore 2 times in the next 3 weeks, along with the trip to Buffalo in the middle. That's going to be a tough 3-game stretch for them. And then on Sunday Night Football, they face the Miami Dolphins in Miami. Every time these two teams face off, Tua and Joe Burrow, always something interesting happens. So that'll be a game I'm going to be keeping my eye on. And then they host Arizona and then host Cleveland to close out the year, which I think both of those games are winnable for the Bengals. So it's challenging, like I said, but there's a lot of games here that are not only important, but also very, very exciting. I'm really excited for the Vikings and for the Broncos. I'll say this. If the Bengals can start 2-0 and beat the Browns and the Jaguars, I think they're probably going to beat either the Bengals or the Vikings or the Broncos. I think if they win the first 2 games, they start 3-1. If they start 0-2, they probably are going to go 1-3, maybe 0-4. So it's going to be tough, but it's going to be exciting, and I'm really going to be interested in what this team does early in the year. Overall, though, do I think that they're going to be a great football team? Obviously not. I think they're going to be mid. I have them finishing 3rd in the division, not making the playoffs this year, unfortunately. I apologize. My record for the Cincinnati Bengals in 2025 is going to be 8-9. And when I said slight step backward, literally it's a slight step backward. You got 1 less win than last year for all the reasons that I mentioned. They didn't have a great free agency. Obviously, they lost more than they added. And, of course, there's a lot of newness to their defense, a lot of young guys, a new defensive coordinator. And what this team did last year on offense, having to carry this defense on its back, is not sustainable. In the National Football League, you cannot get away with that for a second year in a row. So I have the Bengals suffering for it as this defense tries to find itself, tries to find its new identity. And 8-9, I think, is pretty fair. I don't think they're going to win 7. They could go 7-10. It's possible, but I don't have them winning 6 games or less. I think like the absolute floor for this team is 7-10. And I would say their ceiling, if this defense can have a Chargers turnaround or a Packers turnaround, and Al Golden is that guy, the Bengals are going to be in the playoffs. They're that good. On offense, they're that good to where if this defense can just be solid, not even good or great, if they can just be solid, I think the Bengals are in the playoffs. Just to me, I don't think with all the newness, I don't think that the defense will be good enough to reach that mark. But with that being said, there is the potential, that upside is there, that potential is there. And obviously, we've seen what Joe Burrow can do when he reaches the playoffs. Every single time he's been there, he's been in the AFC Championship. So very, very dangerous. And if the Bengals can start off better than what they did last year and maybe kind of go on a similar run that they did last year and sneak into the playoffs as like a 6th or a 7th seed, they're going to be extremely, extremely dangerous. But it's going to rely on that defense stepping up. And unfortunately, I do not think so. But there's going to be some important storylines to be looking at for the Cincinnati Bengals. And we start on the defensive side of the ball with Shamar Stewart and Demetrius Knight, because these guys really do need to develop well for them. And I'll also throw in McKinley Jackson, Chris Jenkins in there as well, along with Barrett Carter. And I think Josh Newton is a young corner too, but he's going to be a backup for now. Kind of like what I said with the Browns in their season preview video, with their young guys really needing to step up. In this case, the young guys on the defensive side really need to step up. Their drafting has been so bad on the defensive side for the Bengals. That's part of the reason why their defense has not been good last year. And they really need some of their draft picks to step up here, play well. And like I said, it's not a high bar to reach if this defense can just be solid. I think the Bengals are a playoff team. This offense is that good that the defense doesn't really need to do too much for the Bengals to be a much better football team. So if these young guys can step up and get better as the year goes along, I'd be more inclined to believe that the Bengals are leaning toward a playoff team. It's going to be interesting to see. Demetrius Knight, I think, is going to have some more growing pains than Shamar Stewart, but it's going to be, I don't know. I can't really say much more about it, but those guys on the defensive side are going to be really important for the Bengals if they want to do anything better than going 8-9. And then, of course, the progression of this defense all around is very important. With a new defensive coordinator, things have to come together a little bit for them. And so seeing what Al Golden does, how this defense progresses, is going to be really important in determining where the Bengals land. And then we jump to the offensive side, where we really need to see a step forward, not a significant step forward, but continued development of Andre Yosavash, Jermaine Burton, and tackle Armarius Mims, their former first-round pick. Armarius Mims specifically because they need good offensive linemen. He needs to step up and be good this year. And then Yosavash and Burton, they don't need to be all of a sudden like world beaters, be insane. No, they don't need to be that. But they need to step up and play a more contributing role just to help alleviate some of the pressure off of Jamar Chase and T. Higgins. Obviously, those guys are still going to get a lot of attention, as they should, rightfully so. But if Jermaine Burton and Yosavash can help alleviate some of that pressure, take away maybe a little bit of that attention, I think overall this will make this offense not only continue to be good and continue to be at the standard that it's set at now, being a consistent top 10 offense every single year, if not top 5, it's just going to be healthy. It's going to be healthier for this offense if those guys can step up. All three of those guys can step up and play better, just so this offense can continue to sustain the success that it's had since Joe Burrow has gotten there in Cincinnati. And that's the big question for them on that side is, will its offense continue to be top 10 as this defense goes through its growing pains? And we probably see a slow start for the Cincinnati Bengals this year. Does the offense continue to be really good, or does it fall off a little bit? If this defense or this offense doesn't perform as well as it has, maybe they could hit their floor at 7-10. I don't think so. I think it's going to be another year where this offense maybe starts off sluggish like they always do, and then it gets better as the year goes on. At this point, the Bengals have been doing that same thing for years. It's a trend, so I'm inclined to follow the trend and believe that's going to happen again. But that is going to do it for me today for the Bengals. I don't think this one was as long as the Browns one. It didn't have a lot of ranting, but that's kind of what happens when you talk about a mid-football team, because they're just, again, they're kind of in the middle. I mean, they're not going to be bad. They're not going to be super duper good. They're just going to be, it's going to be another year for the Bengals where maybe they kind of take some small incremental steps forward, but they're not going to be going anywhere fast, in my opinion. And with the Steelers and the Ravens left to talk about, I think they're going to be, out of those three teams in that division, they're going to be the odd one out this year, unfortunately. But it'll be interesting to see what the Bengals do. They got some really fun games on their schedule, a tough one, but definitely something that the Bengals can manage. So that is gonna do it for me. If you guys have made it this far, please consider hitting the like button and subscribe button, as it helps the channel out tremendously. We're at 96 subscribers. We're trying to reach 100 before the 2025 season starts. You guys are doing a fantastic job. Continue hitting that button. Please do. It's free. And if it's free, it's for me. You know what I'm saying? Always can never turn down something that is for free. Also, let me know your thoughts in the comments down below. Bengals fans, do you think that I am too low on your team? Do you think they're going to bounce back this year and make the playoffs? Do some people think the Bengals aren't going to be as good this year? That's really going to be interesting to hear all your thoughts down there in the comments. And then lastly, make sure you share this video along with following me on social media, whether that's on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, TikTok. Follow me on all those platforms. I make content for those guys, posting clips from those socials, posting clips from the show. Right now, I haven't been, because honestly, doing this preview series has taken up a lot of my free time, so I apologize for that. But I am going to be making some scripts, pretty much summarizing every video I make on YouTube into a social media format, so those should be coming out at some point. But for now, that is going to do it for me today, guys. Hope you guys have made it this far and you guys have enjoyed. And as always, I will see you all next time.